an awful lot of people, including me. Here's a man who knows wherever he speaks. See, he had to make a choice. The pain's not going to go away. So how am I going to deal with it? And again, it can either make me bitter or can make me better. What he said is, despite our inability to control circumstances, we're given the gift of being free to respond to our situation in our own way, creatively or destructively. Acceptance means that I allow the process to transform me into the image of God's Son. Now there's an insight in that. If you try to do an end run around it, or to avoid it, or just to complain, or to raise the clenched fist against God, you are really, again, aborting the purpose that God might have used in that situation. Remember, we're not home yet. And the tearless, painless world of heaven is not a world that really we, in our current state, would be well served to experience, because we need to be forged and changed. We are being shaped and prepared for eternity. He goes on to write, it means that I'm willing to let go of who I think I ought to be and become who God wants me to be. The more we fight our pain and sorrow, the more tense we become, and the more the pain is amplified. Many of us try to get out of pain as fast as we can so that we can be more, quote, useful to God. You catch that idea? I have seen this again and again. But again, since it's fresh in my mind, I go back to another scene from The Lord of the Rings. In this case, The Return of the King. There's a scene where Aragorn speaks to Eowyn, and she tells her something that really struck me this time. He says, the time may have come in your life for you to have valor without renown. You catch the idea? Valor without renown. She wanted to go out into this battle. And he's telling her, you need to protect the people there and lead them into this location, into the place of safety. And he says that is just as valorous as what one might do on the field of battle. But it will not give you the renown that you might want. And I think that's a good word for all of us. I think all of us are called to choose the way of valor in this life. To see it that we're in a warfare. Whether we receive renown, that is to say the accolades of others, is not the issue. But the issue is, if we're serving the living God, then He Himself does know. And He knows you intimately, and what you do will not be lost. In spite of the fact that it seems that everything is destroyed, 1 Corinthians chapter 15 tells us otherwise, because this isn't over yet. This warfare isn't over yet. No matter what happens to us, there's more. There is the resurrection. And in light of the fact that ultimately death will be swallowed up in victory, the victory of Christ's resurrection and our resurrection because of His, the last verse, this glorious chapter on the resurrection itself, ends with this word of encouragement. 1 Corinthians 15:58. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your toil is not in vain in the Lord. In other words, what you do is not going to be in vain. Even if no others notice, it will not be in vain. Therefore, I submit to you that the people who will perhaps be receiving the greatest reward in the kingdom of heaven may not be those who made it in church history textbooks. You see, they will not be known. Others may not even know what they went through, their quiet struggles and so forth. But they, in fact, had valor without renown. But actually there was renown because God knows. And therefore, that's a pretty good audience. You see, and if you play to that audience, then I think it really matters. So this idea of being useful, God is reminding us again and again that His greatest treasure fills earthen vessels in order to show that the transcendent power belongs to Him and not to us. And it's not a question of how useful we perceive we are. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7 talks about this. When he says, we have this treasure in earthen vessels, so that the surpassing greatness of the power will be of God, and not from ourselves. And then going ahead to 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 and 10. And he said to me, after he prayed 3 times that this thorn in the flesh, we don't know what it was, would be removed, he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected" how? In weakness. "Most gladly, therefore, I will rather boast about my weakness, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore I am well content with weaknesses, with insults, with distresses, with persecutions, with difficulties for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong." And so the idea is that the process that God will use for our highest good may not always be the one we have in mind. You see, so again, it might be that we're not, quote, quote, as useful as we should be. See, so we wrestle with those kinds of things and say, if I've done this thing and this is a good thing, why isn't it actually affecting and why isn't it serving other people? I create something and then it doesn't seem to go anywhere. But I don't think that's the issue. God is the one who discerns and judges where that goes. So I just want to conclude by saying that pain and suffering produce a fork in the road. It's not possible to remain unchanged. To let others or circumstances dictate your future is to have chosen. To allow the pain to corrode your spirit, Hansel writes, is to have chosen. And to be transformed into the image of Christ by these difficult and trying circumstances is to have chosen. So we choose, and we're called to choose wisely and choose well. End up with this little quote by C.S. Lewis. "We were made not primarily that we may love God, but that God may love us. To ask that God's love should be content with us as we are is to ask that God cease to be God. What we would here and now call our happiness is not the end God chiefly has in view." He's more concerned about your holiness than he is about your happiness. We've said this before, about your character than your comfort. And if this is a soul-making world, a soul-forming world, then we have to look not now, but where is he taking us, and can I trust him with the outcome? And if I look back and realize how he has been good in the past to me, the death, burial, resurrection of Christ, my co-crucifixion with him, and all the tender mercies that he's brought me through so far, can I trust him with the outcome? It always comes down to a question of trust. And though you do not see him, 1 Peter 1 writes, yet you love him. And though you do not see him now, but believe in him, you greatly